Imagine it's 2 a.m. in a quiet Osaka neighborhood. You might hear a truck pull up, but it kills its engine almost immediately. A few muffled sounds like furniture being moved very carefully, and then 10 minutes later, the truck starts again and just drives away. The next morning, you notice the door to your neighbor's apartment is unlocked. You'd see him sometimes, the man from 3B. He always looked exhausted, crushed by something. You peek inside, his mail's on the table, there's coffee in the pot, but his computer, a single suitcase, and the man himself are gone. You'd probably think it was kidnapping, a disappearance. You'd call the police. But in Japan, it's just as likely he paid for this. This wasn't a crime, it was a service. There are companies, they call them night movers, whose entire business is making people vanish. No goodbyes, no arguments, just a silent removal in the middle of the night, leaving almost everything behind. They call it Jouhatsu evaporation, and it's believed over 100,000 people do this every single year.
It really is a profoundly unsettling reality. And that number, I mean, over 100,000 annually, that just puts the staggering scale of this into perspective for you, doesn't it?
It's almost unbelievable.
It is. So our mission in this deep dive, really, is to get beyond just that shocking statistic. We want to understand the mechanics of how this actually happens, and maybe even more importantly, the really fundamental cultural pressures in Japanese society. The things that make this kind of self-erasure not just possible, but, well, for hundreds of thousands, the most viable option left.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So Jouhatsu, you said it literally translates to evaporation or vanishing. We're talking about someone choosing to disappear. How is this different from, a missing person case we might hear about in the West?
Right, and that distinction is absolutely vital. It frames everything. Because, in North America or Europe, if an adult vanishes without a trace, the immediate thought is almost always foul play.
Yeah, or maybe an accident, something terrible.
Exactly. Or perhaps, a sudden breakdown, someone running away impulsively due to a mental health crisis. Jouhatsu is fundamentally different because it's often a highly calculated, conscious, premeditated decision.
Premeditated.
Yes. To erase one's identity once past. These individuals are actively, deliberately cutting all ties, family, job, friends, financial records, everything. The goal is to start completely fresh, often moving to some anonymous megacity, adopting a whole new life. They aren't victims in the typical sense. They're the architects of their own disappearance. They actually pay specialists to make it happen.
Paying someone to help you vanish. And what's fascinating here, it's not even a brand new thing, is it? Even if that 100,000 number feels very modern and shocking, our sources show the term Jouhatsu actually popped up back in the 1960s.
That's absolutely right. Initially, it was predominantly tied to domestic issues, people wanting to escape unhappy marriages rather than face what was often a very long, drawn-out, and frankly, socially shameful process of getting a formal divorce back then.
So it was a way out of a bad situation at home initially.
Pretty much. And it's important to note, the term really gained wider public recognition after that 1967 film, A Man Vanishes. It was critically acclaimed, centered on this very theme of voluntary disappearance. It sort of planted the seed, culturally, that this was even a possibility.
Ah, okay. So the idea entered the public consciousness, but the phenomenon itself, the sheer numbers, that really exploded in the 1990s. That context seems critical.
Oh, absolutely. That's the economic trigger. The 1990s, you remember, saw the spectacular bursting of Japan's massive speculative economic bubble, the lost decade, they called it. When that financial collapse hit, it caused widespread corporate bankruptcies, huge job losses, people suddenly facing insurmountable personal debts. And when financial failure hits that hard, especially for men in that high-pressure corporate world, well, Jouhatsu suddenly became a pragmatic, if incredibly radical, alternative to completely losing face.
Okay, that brings us right to the core cultural piece. Why choose total erasure? Why is just disappearing seen as, I think you said, cleaner or somehow more sensible than facing failure, declaring bankruptcy, or, seeking some kind of public redemption like we might expect elsewhere?
This is where we really have to dig into the foundational structure of the society. Japanese society places this immense, almost, suffocating value on strict social expectations, on unwavering conformity, and above all else, on collective harmony.
Harmony above all.
Yes. And this ideology, it stands in really direct, stark contrast to the dominant Western ideal of, say, public redemption. where, failure is sometimes even framed as a necessary step towards reinvention, where talking about your mistakes is almost encouraged.
So in Japan, when failure hits, and it could be severe financial ruin, the shame of losing a job, maybe academic failure, even a marriage ending badly, it's not just a personal thing. It brings profound shame. The word is haji, and it's not just on you, but on your whole immediate family or in the business world, your whole team, your department.
Precisely. That collective judgment, the weight of it, can feel absolutely unbearable. The pressure is fundamentally about avoiding meiwaku. That translates roughly to causing trouble, annoyance, or inconvenience to others.
Don't cause trouble for the group.
Exactly. So for many people trapped in that kind of situation, escaping entirely evaporating is psychologically seen as a cleaner, maybe quicker, sometimes even a more honorable way to avoid that disgrace, to spare their loved ones the public humiliation of being associated with that failure. Their personal honor is just so deeply tied to external approval, to maintaining that flawless public facade.
If the pressure is really that pervasive, I think there's that famous saying that explains it perfectly. The nail that sticks out calls the hammer.
That is the perfect distillation. It really speaks to the absolute difficulty of deviating from the norm, from the prescribed path. Conformity, keeping social harmony, these aren't just preferred, they're practically mandatory over individual expression or, going your own way. When you become that nail sticking out the person in debt, the bankrupt one, the unemployed one, the easiest, most radical way to stop drawing that hammer is just to remove yourself from the picture entirely.
We came across the story of Norihiro, an engineer who lost his job. His actions just perfectly capture this crushing, silent shame.
Norihiro's story is just heartbreaking because it shows the sheer length of the deception needed just to keep up appearances. He got laid off, right? But instead of telling his family, he kept up the lie for weeks.
Weeks? How?
Every single morning, he'd meticulously put on his suit and tie, kiss his wife goodbye, drive off, pretending to go to an office that wasn't his anymore.
So what did he do all day?
He'd spend the entire day just sitting in his car, parked miles away from home. Sometimes he'd even stay out late just to maintain the illusion, pretending he was out drinking with colleagues he no longer had. Okay. He was literally acting out an identity that was already dead, financially speaking.
That's exhausting just thinking about it.
Terribly so. But eventually, the salary stopped coming. The debt collector started calling. The lie just became impossible to sustain. And rather than face his family with the truth that he'd failed in the primary role society assigned him, he just vanished. No trace. He became a Jouhatsu. He chose total erasure over confronting the shame of unemployment in a culture where leaving a company, even if you're pushed out, can be seen as deeply, deeply shameful.
And it's not just about personal finances, is it? There was another case, Kenji, a section chief in a Tokyo company. His situation shows how a professional mistake can become this overwhelming, identity-shattering burden because of the culture.
Yeah, Kenji's situation was corporate. He made a serious calculation error, a mistake that cost his firm a major client. And that failure brought what they call metsu, which is more than just embarrassment. It's deep, lasting shame upon his entire department, his bosses, everyone connected.
So he wasn't running from the law or anything like that?
No, not at all. He wasn't running from a crime. He was running from an identity that had failed to uphold its institutional obligation. That sense of Giri, or duty.
What did you do?
He apparently spent weeks just dressing for work, going out, but sitting in a park, completely frozen by indecision. Couldn't go to the office, couldn't face going home. Until finally he called one of these Yonigeya, these night-moving companies.
But he disappeared.
Left his jacket hanging on his chair at the office, apparently. Made it look like he just stepped out for a moment. But he was gone forever. He was escaping the crushing weight of cultural honor, the expectation of professional perfection. Because, as many sources point out, Japanese society often doesn't offer a clear, easy path for public rehabilitation, There's no obvious second chance button.
Wow. No second chance.
That lack of a clear, accepted way to publicly redeem yourself really forces people into these radical private acts. It's like an immediate, self-inflicted execution of the identity that failed. And this brings us right to a crucial psychological mechanism that allows this to happen. The conflict between Honne and Teimei.
Right. These terms, they really capture that internal split, don't they? That many Japanese citizens seem to live with every day. Honne is what? Your true feelings.
Exactly. Honne refers to a person's true feelings, their real desires, their in reality. It's like the true sound of the self.
Okay. And Teimei.
Teimei is the carefully constructed opposite. It's the public face, the behavior and opinions you display because they're expected. It's the polished facade, the built-in front, literally. Teimei is strictly what society requires based on your position, your role, your circumstances, completely, regardless of your inner Honne.
So keeping up appearances is paramount.
Absolutely. And since public failure is such a devastating source of shame, upholding that perfect tatame often means you have to avoid direct confrontation, avoid disagreement, avoid telling difficult truths, maybe even resorting to white lies just to minimize discord and save face for everyone involved.
The struggle sounds just exhausting. It's like a constant internal battle between the public self, the tatame, and the true self, the Honne. And you mentioned Giri earlier, the social obligations. That ties in here too.
Oh, absolutely. Giri is that sense of reciprocal social debt. The duty you owe to your family, your colleagues, your community. If your Honne, maybe your failure or your desire to just leave forces you to break Giri, you're not just feeling yourself. You're actively inflicting debt and trouble onto your whole network.
So the conflict isn't just internal.
Not at all. The conflict between Honne and Giri has been a central theme in Japanese drama, literature, theater for centuries. You think protagonists constantly forced to choose between their obligations to their lord, their family, and their personal desires or feelings.
And in modern life, if you spend decades maintaining this perfect facade, the successful engineer, the flawless spouse, the diligent student, and the gap between that external demand, the tatame, and your internal reality, your Honne, just becomes too massive, too unbearable. Jouhatsu starts to look like the only way out. It effectively kills the failed tatame persona entirely.
It's the ultimate resolution of that cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we can actually see similar coping mechanisms in other contemporary social issues in Japan. We've touched before on hikikomori, for instance.
Right, the extreme social withdrawal, people locking themselves in their rooms for years.
Exactly. If Jouhatsu's the physical vanishing, hikikomori feels like the psychological vanishing.
Two sides of the same coin.
I think you could definitely argue that. Both are these radical private attempts to cope with the immense difficulty of maintaining that Honne-Teimei split under relentless societal pressure. In both cases, the individual seems to decide that the only way to handle the impossibility of perfect conformity is just removal, either physical removal into anonymity or total social removal into isolation. It really speaks to a profound societal flaw when the main coping mechanism for failure isn't rebuilding, but erasing.
But disappearance, like we said, it's rarely a simple DIY thing. It takes planning, secrecy, often money, which is why this whole process actually spawned an entire shadow industry, the Yonigeya.
Yeah, this is a truly unique industry. It's specialized entirely in facilitating disappearance, providing a professional service to legally or quasi-legally dismantle a life. Yonigeya literally translates to something like fly-by-night shops or night movers.
Night movers.
Right. And they're not just moving furniture. They're orchestrating a total vanishing act. They help clients shred their paper trail, set up the basics to start fresh, completely anonymously.
The services sound incredibly meticulous, almost clinical in their secrecy.
Oh, they are. The operation is typically very swift, very silent, and almost always nocturnal. They use nondescript vans, usually white or dark colors. Their staff wear dark clothing to just blend into the shadows, minimize any attention.
And they're fast.
Hyper efficient. Often, they complete the entire packing and moving of the person's chosen essentials, just the absolute minimum before dawn breaks. And crucially, they often assist with everything around the new identity too. Finding new, often cash-only places to live, far away. Identifying new, low-profile jobs that help maintain total anonymity.
Okay, let's talk about the practical side, the logistics, the cost. A service this specialized, needing perfect timing, perfect secrecy, it can't be cheap, especially if the person wanting to vanish is already in financial trouble.
No, it's definitely not cheap. And the cost structure varies hugely. It really depends on the complexity and the risk involved. For a basic, straightforward move, single person, minimal stuff, the fees might range from, say, $50,000 up to maybe $300,000. That's roughly, what, $450 to $2,600 USD?
Oh,
somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay, that's a starting point. But it can go much higher.
Oh, yes. It escalates drastically based on specific needs. If the client has a lot of belongings, if they need to move a really long distance, or that nocturnal timing is absolutely critical for stealth, maybe escaping an immediate threat, the price goes up.
And security issues.
That's the biggest jump. If the client needs extra security or quasi-legal help. Maybe they're fleeing violent creditors, stalkers, or in really extreme cases, Yakuza debt collectors, the cost skyrockets. And moving a whole family, especially with kids involved, that can run into tens of thousands of dollars easily. The risk and the logistical complexity just increase exponentially.
What's really crucial here, though, is that this whole industry operates, for the most part, legally, or at least in a vast legal gray area in Japan.
That's the absolute foundation of their business model. It's not illegal in Japan for a financially solvent adult to simply choose to disappear. Just walk away.
Really? Just like that?
Pretty much. And the legal system is very hands-off when it comes to voluntary abandonment. Japanese police rarely, if ever, investigate voluntary adult disappearances unless there's substantial evidence pointing to foul play.
And privacy laws.
Very stringent. They severely restrict access to bank records, phone data, surveillance footage, unless there's a serious criminal investigation underway. So the Yonigeya exploit this legal blind spot perfectly. They offer a professional service that completely bypasses family intervention, bypasses official channels, without technically breaking any specific laws themselves.
But hold on. If the police rarely investigate and privacy laws are that strict, doesn't that kind of make the state, the legal system itself, complicit? Even unintentionally. They're basically enabling abandonment, even till the person is legally allowed to leave.
That is the critical tension, exactly. You're hitting on the deep philosophical conflict here.
Yeah.
The state prioritizes individual privacy and autonomy to such a degree that it, maybe inadvertently, enables this mass social disconnection. It's this hands-off approach that allows the Yonigeya industry to thrive. They provide a way out when the traditional paths, justice system, family court, social services are seen as too slow, too shameful, or just ineffective. They're bypassing an institutional failure.
Which brings us to the really complex ethical side, the moral dimension. Especially when the person vanishing isn't running from shame or debt, but is actually running for their safety.
Yes, this really highlights the dual nature of these Yonigeya. On one hand, they might be helping someone abandon financial or family duties, but on the other hand, they sometimes function as a literal lifeline, a rescue service, in situations where the state or the police have clearly failed to protect someone.
We saw the testimony of Rina, a woman escaping an abusive partner. She talked quite openly about feeling the police just hadn't helped her. They dismissed her calls, her injuries as just domestic disputes, didn't offer real sustained protection.
Rina's story is a profound example of a Yonigeya operating in what seems like a clearly positive way. She was desperate, turned to a night moving company. Her escape was planned like a spy thriller, apparently.
How so?
Detailing the husband's exact commute times, using coded messages through payphones, timing the actual physical move down to the minute. She and her son were gone within minutes, just vanished completely from his life.
Okay. This immediately creates a huge ethical dilemma for us looking in. On one side, the Yonigeya is a rescue service. It's helping Rina exercise her basic right to autonomy to survive a dangerous situation. But on the other side, they're still operating in this moral gray zone, right? Profiting from and enabling the breakup of a family. Her partner, regardless of his actions, might later see it that way.
The ambiguity is just unavoidable. And to make it even more complex, some Yonigeya companies, like one firm called Yonigeya TSC, are actually run by survivors of domestic violence themselves.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. So that organizational structure really underscores that for at least some operators, the primary focus is squarely on safety. They position themselves as this essential, discrete lifeline where official support is just desperately lacking.
But that still only accounts for a fraction of the business, presumably. Aren't the majority of these companies simply facilitating the abandonment of debt or helping people avoid personal responsibility, marital duties?
Statistically, yes, probably. The main driver for Jouhatsu, overwhelmingly, seems to remain financial ruin and that crushing weight of haji, of shame. The Yonigeya industry has to walk this tightrope. They know they're enabling radical solutions to deep social problems. But ultimately, their business is responding to a massive silent market demand that's created by these intense cultural pressures. They sell one thing: guaranteed anonymity.
So, okay, the operation is done. The Yonigeya has done its job. The person is successfully evaporated. What does life actually look like then, in the shadows? We establish it's probably not a glamorous new beginning.
No, far, far from it. This is where the grim reality really kicks in. Jouhatsu very rarely escape to a life of luxury or even comfort. Because they can't use their old identity, their financial resources are usually severely limited. They have to avoid any kind of official documentation. So the vast majority end up living in, frankly, abject poverty.
Where do they live? How do they survive?
Often in pretty unsanitary housing. And they're forced to take precarious, poorly paid, sometimes dangerous daily jobs, just day labor, cash in hand. Their need for absolute anonymity means they can't apply for stable, declared work with benefits or paying taxes.
That inherent fragility, that constant need to live completely off the books, it must make them incredibly vulnerable, right?
Absolutely. They become easy targets, easy prey for organized crime. These individuals form this kind of desperate, highly motivated ghost workforce, and mafia organizations often step in to hire them for undeclared labor in Japan's thriving underground economy. They're basically just surviving, not really living, constantly looking over their shoulder perhaps, but maybe finding some strange hollow freedom in being anonymous, free from that original shame.
Where do you even go in a country like Japan, which feels so monitored, to achieve that level of extreme anonymity? To just blend in?
They tend to drown in the deep anonymity of the mega cities, Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, these huge urban sprawls. And they often gravitate towards specific, historically marginalized day labor districts, places like Sanya in Tokyo or Kamagasaki in Osaka.
What are those areas like?
These are districts that have always kind of served as havens for the poor, the marginalized, places where you can find really cheap lodging, sometimes called doya and casual cash-in-hand work, that requires zero documentation and asks zero awkward questions.
The story of Kaido really brings this vulnerability home.
Yeah, Kaido fled just insurmountable business debts. His decision to vanish was incredibly swift. He literally told his family he's just stepping out for cigarettes and never went back, never returned to his old life.
And where is he now?
Today, he lives in a tiny single room in one of these doya lodging houses in the Sanya district. He works cash-in-hand construction jobs, pays no taxes, and, crucially, he has no official registration, no koseki, and no health insurance. Nothing.
Koseki, that's the family registration system, right? The legal bedrock of identity in Japan. To live without it, you're basically a non-person.
It's worse than just being unregistered. It's being legally invisible. Without a koseki, you can't get formal health care, you can't vote, you can't hold any kind of secure employment. Kaido is legally dead to his past life. And socially, he's just a ghost in the system. The price he paid to escape shame is this existence defined by profound vulnerability, existential precarity.
So this ghost population, replenished by, what, an estimated 100,000 new people every year, that represents a massive, uncounted hole in Japan's whole economic and social structure.
It absolutely does. They're participating in the labor force, but they're completely invisible to official stats. They don't contribute to the pension system, the formal welfare system, until maybe they get too old or too sick to work anymore. Yet there are still citizens somewhere. This significantly impacts things like labor force participation rates, demographic data, the long-term viability of social welfare systems. It's this huge informal community acting as a shadow economy that the government, in a really fascinating paradox, seems to almost silently tolerate.
Why would the government just turn a blind eye to such a large, seemingly damaging social issue? Especially given Japan's reputation for order, for meticulous record-keeping.
Well, I think it comes down to reputation and maybe institutional capacity or willingness. Admitting the true staggering scale of Jouhatsu would mean officially recognizing the limits, maybe even the harmful effects of Japanese society on its own citizens. It would force confrontation with those crushing social pressures, the shame culture that drives people to this extreme escape in the first place. It's perhaps socially easier to just ignore the problem than to try and fix the deep structural flaws that create it.
So, in a strange way, the evaporated population actually ends up serving the country's needs.
Precisely, in a dark, paradoxical way.
Yeah.
By existing outside the formal system, this desperate, cheap workforce is readily available to do jobs that documented citizens might refuse, jobs that are too dangerous, too unpleasant. The most extreme example of this kind of utilitarian exploitation, came after the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster.
Right. When the cleanup needed thousands of workers willing to take on extremely high-risk jobs at radioactive sites.
Exactly. Jouhatsu were reportedly hired extensively for that kind of undeclared, incredibly high-risk work. These societal outcasts, surviving by living outside the law, end up being used for the nation's most dangerous, most difficult tasks. It really highlights the uncomfortable, deeply entrenched way this phenomenon is integrated into the social and economic order. They almost become society's necessary sacrifice.
It's chilling. As chilling as the existence of the Jouhatsu and the industry supporting them is, we absolutely have to talk about the families left behind. The human cost here feels perhaps the most immense, the most tragic.
They are the silent grievers, aren't they? The families are trapped in this agonizing emotional and legal limbo. There's no official closure, there's no body to bury, there's no end to their loved one's story. They spend years, decades sometimes, just wondering, is their family member alive? Are they safe? Are they in desperate trouble? That ambiguity, that not knowing, it's often described as the worst form of emotional torture.
And because of the huge social stigma that Haji, again, many families actually conceal the disappearance completely. They create this social fiction, telling neighbors and friends that the person just moved away for work, or maybe they're traveling abroad. It's this painful mutual silence.
Exactly. The stigma prevents them from speaking openly about their loss, prevents them from seeking community support when they need it most. And because, as we said, police intervention is minimal due to the voluntary nature and the legal restrictions, the families are often forced to rely on expensive private detectives.
Who probably don't have much luck.
Often very slim chances, realistically, especially if they're trying to locate someone who has paid specialists and gone to extreme lengths, specifically not to be found.
Then there's the profound, painful legal limbo that just compounds all that grief. Under Japanese law, someone is only officially considered absent after, 7 years?
A devastating 7 years of disappearance. Yes, that 7-year rule. It's rooted in historical family registration laws, tied to the concept of presumptive death. Only once that 7-year period has passed can a family legally take steps like dissolving the marriage, settling outstanding debts, or opening inheritance proceedings.
7 years. Just think about that. 7 years of absolute uncertainty before they can even begin to move forward legally or financially. That's nearly a decade of just institutionalized, frozen grief.
It is. So Jouhatsu is this profound disruption, not just of one individual life, but of all the legal, financial, social structures built around that life. It really is the ultimate act of self-erasure, taken when faced with what feels like insurmountable collective pressure. It highlights a culture where maintaining those external appearances, maintaining social harmony, can sometimes necessitate extreme internal sacrifice, extreme desperation.
And yet, there's a poignant twist sometimes, isn't there? What happens if a Jouhatsu is found, or maybe decides to return after years living in the shadows?
Yes, what's truly poignant is the discoveries some Jouhatsu make in that situation.
The sources mention accounts of people who evaporated, maybe driven back by loneliness or illness years later. They return to their families, absolutely terrified of rejection, anger, facing that shame all over again.
And they're often utterly surprised by their loved ones' reactions. In many cases, the families are just overcome with happiness. Pure relief that the person is alive, that they're safe. The original problem, the conflict or failure that drove them to vanish in the first place, the debt, the job loss, the shame, it often becomes completely insignificant compared to the relationship itself.
The relationship proved stronger than the cultural performance.
In those cases, yes. It shows that perhaps the fear of shame was, in some ways, greater than the reality of the family's love or forgiveness.
The phenomenon of Jouhatsu is truly a chilling testament to the hidden lives existing just beneath the surface, beneath the anonymous, often gleaming tapestry of modern Japan. It reveals the silent society of the evaporated, where the pursuit of a completely clean slate requires shedding not just debt or failure, but the entirety of one's old identity.